Now, let's look north of our border. Today marks a year since Zimbabwe's former President Robert Mugabe died in Singapore, aged 95. His 37 years in power saw the end of white minority rule and the introduction of sweeping social reforms. But it was also marked by controversy, which included tribal massacres, land invasions, an economic meltdown, and claims of vote rigging post-2000. Sophie Mokoena compiled this report.
It was on this day last year when Zimbabwe's founding father passed on.
The entire nation of Zimbabwe, our people, across the board, are grieved and are in mourning because the light which led us to independence is no more. But his works, his ideology will continue to guide this nation.
The country observed an official mourning period with many visiting the Blue Roof. But the process was marred by drama as the family veered away from an official burial, announcing he would be buried in his home village of Kutama. This was a contrast to the tradition of laying him at the Hero's Acre, and the last sign he had not forgiven those who had removed him from power. But a memorial service was held at the National Stadium where his successor sought to reach out to Mugabe's supporters and family. Meanwhile, the ANC delegation will visit Zimbabwe.
The Secretary General will lead the delegation, but the date has not been set because we need to coordinate with the ZANU-PF, the other side. So the date will then be determined. I'll probably think it's also a matter that should happen in the course of this month.
Sophie Mokoena, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, let's look at the state of Zimbabwe a year after Mugabe's death. Political analyst Alexander Rusero joins us now. Mr. Rusero, thank you very much. Some were celebrating after Mugabe's fall, but it's always been very complex. Are there Zimbabweans today who are nostalgic about Mugabe's reign?
Sure. Good evening to listeners and viewers. It's a paradox that a year after Robert Mugabe's demise, a lot of people actually miss him, in direct contrast of the celebrations that we witnessed in 2017 when Mugabe was deposed following the intervention of the military in the political dynamics of ZANU-PF. So you would realize that the kind of missing Mugabe that is occurring in Zimbabwe is a reflection and a subtle way to register to the Mnangagwa-led government that he has actually become worse than Mugabe's government. Yet it was clear for all and sundry that at least where Zimbabwe had reached during Mugabe's reign, nobody could actually succeed or surpass that dismal record of decimating a country he inherited as a jewel of Africa in 1980. But alas, that's exactly where we are as Zimbabwe, where we actually wish Robert Mugabe was better, which is in contrast and contradiction to the people's expectations in 2017.
Yeah, and you're pointing to the fact there that some were hoping for real change in Zimbabwe when Emmerson Mnangagwa became president. Now, to mix the animal metaphors, some believed that Mnangagwa himself, he had a history, he had been close to Mugabe in the past, that he had changed his spots, but is he still the crocodile, as he's also known?
Yeah, Mnangagwa belongs also to this first generation of nationalists. Mnangagwa has always been on Mugabe's side. He's actually Mugabe's disciple. Sadly, he has become a bad disciple because he has failed to amend. Where Mugabe did bad, Mnangagwa is actually stampeding to do worse. That's why people miss Mugabe more than they actually long for Mnangagwa to continue as president.
Yeah.
So it's actually a paradox here in Zimbabwe, because when Mnangagwa, when he came from South Africa after that 2 weeks escape, he made a lot of promises. He made a lot of reflections of somebody who was going to depart from Mugabe's modus operandi. But more or less, we are in a crisis of continuity as opposed to change. It's still the same ZANU-PF. Mugabe might be gone, but Mugabeism is still intact. Only that it has got less sophistication than it had during Mugabe's tenure.
Yeah. And I mean, the economy was Emmerson Mnangagwa's ticket. That's what he said he would focus on. But maybe things are worse than ever. 90% unemployed. It's just incredible what's happening. Zimbabweans, many of them living on money sent home from other nations. The economy has failed, but the government is still in control of the country, so maybe it's not a failed state. How would you describe Zimbabwe's condition?
Yeah, Zimbabwe is far from a failed state, but it's somewhere in between state failure and weak state, where you still have a government that is still preserving the monopoly to use force, where you still have government that also controls money supply. But the reality of the matter is that people are not concerned much about those bookish economics of stability, macroeconomics, etc., which the finance minister daily preaches. People are interested with tangible things at hand. You earn a salary. That salary must equal a living, a decent living. But this is not what is taking place in Zimbabwe. What is taking place in Zimbabwe is disgruntlement, where Zimbabwe is more or less degenerating into a state of nature, a Hobbesian state of nature, of war of all against all. Life in Zimbabwe is nasty, brutish, and short. So this is not kind of a new dispensation that they were promised in 2017. It's actually a form of a new deception that was packaged as a dispensation following the ouster of Robert Mugabe. So things are pretty bad. The hospitals, they are actually death chambers. You can only go to a public hospital at your own detrimental peril. It's a sorry state, but the most worrying thing is that we seem to have an administration that do not care in as much as essentialities of life, such as health and amenities, are concerned. They are not bothered. They are not moved for as long as their power is guaranteed.
And claims of human rights abuses against dissenters as well. We're running out of time. I need to ask you also what you make of the reports that farmers who lost their land would have it returned. Is that the Zimbabwean government saying that the land policy, the policy of land seizures under Mugabe's reign were wrong, although subsequent reports suggest that very few farmers will actually benefit?
Yeah, in the interest of fairness on that one, I think there's been a lot of fake news. There's been a lot of falsifying information. The government's position, if they are going to be sincere, it's very clear. They are going to compensate on the development of the land. It's not like all the people who were resettled in 2000 will lose their farms, or they will be chased away, or there's a reversal of land as is being framed. That's actually dishonesty. That's not the truth, because whatever the Mnangagwa government is doing, as much as the land reform is concerned, is captured in the constitution, which it's not Mnangagwa who assented. It's actually Mugabe, after agreeing with the two MDC formations in form of the MDC Trangirai then and the MDC Mtambara. They wrote a constitution in 2013, which came into effect in 2012. Where the provisions of land are adequately captured. So to then frame that as a reversal of the land reform, I don't think that's dishonest, but it's actually unfortunate that this is in contrast to the Mugabe views pertaining land, to the ZANU-PF's radical stance pertaining land, because what is happening is more or less a desperate attempt by ZANU-PF to appease the angry spirits of the whites, to appease the angry spirits of the Americans and the Britons, which is against the expectations of a state which had charted the way forward in as much as dealing with the land issue in Africa, the land question was concerned.
All right, fascinating. Thank you very much for your analysis, political analyst Alexander Rusero.